Welcome to our sixth episode of Taking Inventory. I'm James Barrow, here with my co-host Daniel Druger, and today we have an awesome guest, Emad Hasan. Yeah, he's the founder of Retina AI and AI Whiteboard. He's probably one of the most respected thinkers when it comes to AI and marketing, so extremely excited to get to have a conversation with him. But before we get to the interview, let's dive into the news. Daniel, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, we had some pretty fun announcements this week. But before we get into that, if anyone wants to jump straight to the interview with Emad Hasan, you can skip to the 1320 mark of the podcast, and you'll be taken right there. For everyone else, today we're going to cover Twitter starting to outsource some of their ad monetization, first for the company, GoPuff starting to offer non-endemic ads. And so we'll get into what that means for GoPuff and Bevmo. Trade Desk launched a campaign to unbreak the internet. And so we'll talk about what that means and who they're coming after. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Omnicom CEO John Wren telling investors that AI is an arms race between developers like Google, Meta, Amazon, and so many more, and what they're doing and how they're partnering with a lot of those companies. So let's dive into the first one, Twitter. A few weeks after announcing Linda Yaccarino as the new CEO of the company, we now find that they are working with a company called InMobi to actually outsource some of their ad monetization. This is something that, is, again, a first for the company, going outside of their own ad sales team to sell some of this. And James, it's something that, frankly, at Snap, I don't think we would have ever done because we were just so protective of losing that customer touch point and being able to keep that data private, secure, and within the walled garden. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think when you reference our time at Snap, this is probably something we definitely would not have done. And I don't think it's a great idea, to be totally honest with you about it. There's a couple problems that come from this. One is, in a lot of ways, Twitter now doesn't get to use all this amazing logged in data that they have access to. So like you're seeing on one hand, Facebook and Google showing how awesome Advantage Plus and Force Max can be when they're closing the loop and leveraging all that first party data. This is like inherently the opposite. The other thing, and you reference this, is losing the customer touch point is not ideal. Like there's so many reasons why you want to own the customer. I think this is maybe, hopefully for them, it's like a short-term revenue grab as they go ahead and get their systems in place. But, there's a moment where you have to decide, like, are you a platform or are you a publisher? And that leads to a lot of different decisions in terms of what kind of ad tech you're building. This says, we don't really think we're a platform. We're now a publisher. I bet you 6 months from now, this is not how they are monetizing, but it's probably a distraction, like in reality, for all the stuff they have to build. And I do think it's going to lead to just like a lower quality of ads. So yeah, I don't love it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think many have talked about kind of the perception of ads like that being much lower quality, kind of losing the ability to use kind of Twitter's proprietary data in a better way. But I think, in their defense, this is a one market pilot. So they say they're going to roll this out to a few markets over the next coming months. But frankly, I think this is a stopgap as Linda comes in as the new CEO. She's got such a heavy ad sales background coming from NBC and Turner that this seems like a way to monetize the platform while they're getting their house in order.
Yeah, I hope so. We've talked about this a ton in the past, but like, if I were there, I don't think, to me, focusing on this feels like, again, kind of the wrong angle. Like they got to figure out a way to go ahead and generate unique mid-market SMB demand. And they have so many levers that they could do to use that this has like nothing to do with. None of those advertisers are probably bidding inside this in reality. So, I think it's good for now, but I'd be excited to see like when they roll out their like Advantage Plus competitor. Like that to me kind of shows that they're getting serious about monetizing this thing.
Maybe this news will make you a little happier and more excited then that GoPuff, which has run its own retail media arm, offering many of its marketplace CPG brands access to ad inventory on its app and in store, has just announced they're going to be offering non-endemic ads in those places. And what that means for folks listening is instead of just advertisers that, are on the shelves or on the digital shelves of GoPuff, now these can be advertisers that are promoting films, that are promoting cars, that are promoting different services that maybe are not native to GoPuff. And so it's the first foray for them into something that can become a much bigger ad platform.
Yeah, I love this. And this is as sad as the Twitter stuff makes me feel. This from an ad tech perspective, I think this is awesome. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think, to GoPuff's credit, like, for all practical purposes, they are a publisher. And this is something that makes a lot of sense for a publisher to do. Now, if they were, a 500 million user service or however big Twitter is, I think you have like a different approach. But for a publisher, and having that publisher mindset, it makes all the sense in the world. And so I think you'll see more retailers doing this. I think you'll see the retailers helping use their data for audience extension into the social networks. So I think that could be really cool. But yeah, I think I'm shocked that like more of these kind of retail media platforms aren't doing this. So hopefully they get good results out of this and it kind of inspires people to do more. I know in this case, I think they're working with Rocked. And one thing that I know that Rock does, which is another reason why this is, I think, just a cool idea in general and why other retailers should do it, is like not only are they going to optimize to serve the ad kind of post checkout, but if they think they can get you to buy more products from GoPuff, they also can do that. So it's an opportunity to sort of monetize under monetized users, and I think that's really clever. So yeah, I think this is going to be a big hit for GoPuff.
So in other news, that is kind of a combination of Twitter's open advertising and then GoPuff opening kind of new types of ads, is the Trade Desk. And they've just launched what they're calling an Unbreak the Internet campaign. And they're actually coming after the walled gardens. So they're calling out Google and the Metas and shedding light on some of their business practices and what they think is detrimental for consumers and for the internet in general. And they're really strong proponents of a more open and transparent approach to the internet. And so, this is something that they've been vocal about in the past, but this is the first time I think we've seen an actual campaign, which is being run through their platform on CTV and other mediums. And so they're talking about an open internet is better for consumers, that letting a few walled gardens control so much of advertising on the internet is going to have disastrous consequences for consumers, for publishers over time. And they want to shed a light on that.
Yeah, Daniel, I saw this and I totally get where they're coming from, like from a macro philosophical level, but I think from like a tactical one and just sort of the reality of what the walled gardens have provided to consumers, it's a hard argument for me to buy. Like I personally think the walled gardens have been extremely beneficial to small businesses, to users. We've gotten all these services that have been ad supported. Even today, if you look at what's happening with a lot of the AI stuff, the fact that they have access to all this information, we have all of these new innovations happening. I definitely think that the walled gardens could be more transparent with their partners, right? Like, I think that's a fair critique. But to say that like a more open, transparent kind of ad, like macro ad exchange is going to be better for the consumer, I don't necessarily agree with. Like, I respect the fact that they're going after this story, but I do think at the end of the day, like the walled gardens are just kind of an easy punching bag. And, I like, this is like not to be dramatic, but like, I don't really want to live like in the internet without them. I think they provide like an unbelievable amount of positives to users. And I actually think they have like their incentives are actually pretty pure. They're trying to help you make money on top of their platforms if they're ad supported. Like when we were at Snap, like we were truly trying to help small businesses make money. And if they did make money, we make money. So I have a hard time kind of seeing where like the kind of evil side of a lot of that is outside of how the platforms have worked with their partners, which I do think that like the business relationship should be much more kind of transparent and clear, but I think that's separate from how the data flows.
Right. And the Trade Desk too, I think in my mind, at least, some of this is a bit performant, that it is easy to go after Meta and Google, but because you're siding with regulation and the consumers and the government in kind of policing these folks and painting them as the bad actors. I think it paints the trade desk as this Robin Hood or these good guys. And so if and when the government would ever look at the trade desk, they are proponents for this open internet. But in an open internet, the trade desk is a very big player, feeding significant number of ads across the open internet and work with the biggest advertisers in the world. And so I think it's a little disingenuous for them to kind of call it out this way, but I see where they're coming from. And it's a good tactic in my mind to do this campaign. And there's really very low risk for them. For our last article of the day, we're going to talk about Omnicom CEO John Wren, who was at an investor day earlier last week, told investors that AI is an arms race between Google, Microsoft, other leading developers, and that Omnicom is actually working with all of these companies to really embrace AI. And it's an interesting, I think, continuation of our conversation last week with Greg Lieber, who discussed a lot about what AI means for agencies and how they're going to be able to compete in this kind of new environment. And so, John Wren, it was interesting. He didn't take a defensive stance. He really said that this is an arms race between those tech companies, and we're going to embrace all of them, and we're going to use it to our advantage. And so I thought that was just a really interesting position for him, where I think we've all viewed agencies and other service providers as being scared or defensive when it comes to AI. And he took kind of the opposite stance, saying this is going to enable so much more for us, and we really need to embrace it.
Yeah, I think John Wren deserves a lot of credit for being really transparent and honest about the impacts of this. I think people can feel that AI is going to make a really big difference when it comes to marketing, but I mean, he said straight up that he believes, I think the quote was like, there's going to be jobs that get automated or eliminated at some point. And so he's starting to move, I think, even those jobs offshore in preparation for it. And, he's really trying to, I think, kind of in the theme of almost like Meta, kind of like this efficiency push. It seems like they're embracing it. And this may be an opportunity for the agencies to shed a bunch of the operational overhead that they have, which like historically, I think it had an impact on their margins. And if they can do that and, become sort of the like trusted experts around how to actually, manage these different AI systems, that makes those businesses pretty interesting. And they already have a really interesting business model usually where they are not floating the media. Like they're usually on the other side of that, and they have a lot of leverage when it comes to payment. So, that plus the idea that they can get maybe leaner and, they can become kind of the trusted expert as all these different kind of foundational changes take place via AI marketing could make it, I think, a more interesting business than it was. And I agree. It's kind of what Greg was alluding to is like, it probably doesn't feel like it's time to count out the agencies quite yet. AI could be its friends.
Yeah. So with this one, I think let's go ahead and get to our interview and start talking to an expert on AI. This week, we're excited to welcome Emad Hasan, CEO and co-founder of Retina AI, and recently launched a newsletter, AI Whiteboard. Retina is one of the first companies that used machine learning to do predictive customer lifetime value and has worked with customers including Nestle, Capital One, Madison Reed, Backcountry.com, Brickell, and many others. Prior to Retina and launching AI Whiteboard, Emad was the head of business marketing analytics at Facebook and has also held roles at PayPal, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Boeing. So Emad, welcome to the podcast. Really excited to dive in about AI Whiteboard and kind of your experience.
Thanks, guys. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I've been listening to the first few episodes. Very excited. I think this is going to be a big one.
Yeah, let's dive right in. You started in aerospace engineering, switched to Facebook, started and founded a machine learning company, and now AI Whiteboard. Walk us through the journey.
Yeah, it's such a strange and long journey. Started off as an engineer, building autopilots for helicopters. I have an undergrad and master's in electrical engineering. Was very excited about building autopilots for helicopters. That was one of the coolest jobs I had right out of school, where I'm like out in the field working with pilots and tuning these models to like actually fly an aircraft. What got very exciting was right after doing that job, I moved out to Los Angeles, worked at Boeing, building guidance systems for satellites. And as I was building guidance systems for satellites, it was very clear to me, this was back in like 2010 timeframe, it was very clear that one day most of these companies would have enough data and data flow that you'd be able to automate a lot of the things that you're doing in your business in a way that you automate a aircraft or build autopilots for aircraft or guidance systems for satellites. So with that in mind, I got very excited about potentially figuring out how would this happen. Now, 2010, there's no AI really going on. There's just data. There's a lot of big data. Big data is the buzzword. And really, all these companies are in the business of collecting a lot of data. So I ended up in the Bay Area for a little bit, started off at PayPal in their decision science team, and worked on a product called Merchant Analytics, where I'm looking at all these transactions from every single company we were doing payment processing for, seeing different trends in the data. And one of the big things that jumps out at me over and over again as I look at every single merchant is that for most companies, 30 to 50% of their customer base seems to be unprofitable. They're paying more money to acquire customers than they're making up in repeat transactions. That trend by itself was pretty interesting and showed an inefficiency in the system. But then after that, I went over to Facebook, where I was running marketing analytics and operations, and got to see how this problem gets created on the ad side of the business, where, as a advertising platform, we just want advertisers to pay us a lot of money to acquire customers. And that's exactly what we were doing. We're asking companies to pay millions of dollars up front to acquire customers, and then waiting anywhere from 3 months to a year to find out which customers are actually profitable. And that's exactly where this problem is born. So that's where my startup of Retina came about. Got together with a couple of really brilliant co-founders, and we started the company Retina that was doing machine learning to predict customer lifetime value. And what made us different or unique was that since we were using it for advertising, using this customer lifetime value signal for advertising, we had to do these predictions early in a customer journey. So as soon as a customer converts, and in many cases, even before a customer truly converts, you're trying to predict their lifetime value, and you're doing it at the individual customer level. Not very easy to do. Fast forward 5 years, AI has come much, has evolved quite a bit. You saw this evolution of deep learning models that were not just like supervised learning models, but now what people were doing was taking the output of deep learning models and feeding it back into the input of the deep learning models, creating this loop that could generate a sequence. So as soon as you connect the output of a deep learning model back into the input of a deep learning model, you have this like sequence generator, on top of which you just saw all these large language models like GPT come about. And this was happening anywhere from like 2017 all the way out to like early last year when ChatGPT came about and things blew up. And it was very clear, not only to us at Retina AI, but like everybody now knew exactly what the potential of this was. So that's how now what I've done is started this newsletter called the AI Whiteboard, which is a newsletter targeted towards CEOs and business executives who want to understand the impact of artificial intelligence on their business. And this is going beyond just the supervised learning stuff and using things like ChatGPT or Midjourney or all the API versions of those for many different applications. So sorry, I've gone off on a little bit of a longer introduction and tangent, but hopefully that gives you a good flavor of how I got here.
No, that's great. And I think, we've looked at your AI whiteboard, and it's, as founders and operators of our business, it's been really fascinating. I guess targeting CEOs and senior level leadership, what do you see right now is kind of the gap in understanding the capabilities and just kind of foundational understandings of what AI is and what AI can do?
Well, I feel like I want to hear your perspectives on this as well. So I'll chime in with my first answer, but then I want to turn it back over to both of you and hear your perspective on this. So I'm a part of this group of WhatsApp CEOs. About 1,300 CEOs from around the world are on this WhatsApp group. And these are not your tech CEOs. These are like CEOs of manufacturing firms, of retail, services firms around the world. And they're all trying to figure out, like, how will this have an impact on my business? So each one of them generally knows that there will be some impact one way or the other, but they don't quite know exactly what will happen. They don't know what tools they should be learning. And I feel like you guys probably are feeling this way, is the pace of innovation is so fast that they're all having a really, really hard time keeping up with this. So this is where I'm excited that, we're going to have this newsletter and we'll be able to talk a little bit about this. But I want to hear your perspective, because you guys are a lot more closer to the ground with both the tech, ad, and the marketing ecosystem with some of the work you're doing. I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, it's funny. We have this conversation a lot actually internally. It's one of those times where it's so clear how impactful this tech is going to be, but it's actually pretty hard to like visualize it because it has such like broad knock-on effects. And because at least like, one thing that we've, when we first started thinking about it, we're all so conditioned to be like so API centric and sort of like if this then that, and like there's an end to the thinking. But like in this world, because it's so evolutionary and like there is sort of there's no end to like where the AI can eventually take you. And also just the marginal cost of it is so hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
That it's taken a while for us to like step back and be like, how do you really build applications around this? Because it is like fundamentally a different framework than at least like what we've been exposed to in ad tech, right? Over the last few years, where like, it was just like, we were just putting basically if then statements into networks APIs, right? I mean, there was clever stuff, going into it, but at the end of the day, that was sort of the extent of it. I think now, it creates just like, the type of product you're building, the like design language of the products. Like, I don't think, that hasn't even been like determined yet. So to me, I like, it just reminds me a lot of like mobile, where everyone's like, oh, we're just going to like shrink down desktop and it's going to be on a phone. And it's like, no, this is going to like break everything.
Yeah, totally. Well, one of the things I want to hear your perspective. So I was at Facebook, you guys were at Snap. And one of the things that while I was there, you could continuously feel that we were automating away the job of the marketer, maybe the media buyer, going from like power editor to like we're automating like all the ads management to things like, media buying optimization. But it was very hard to foresee the job of the creative going away. And I feel like we're at that precipice where that might actually happen this time. Now, like, truly just give us your money and we'll do all the optimization.
Yeah, it's funny. We used to talk about at Snap when we were building out the marketing partnerships program that, we kind of you had to originally, like, you have kind of your generalists, and then over time you try to put partners into a box for all practical purposes so they can specialize.
Yeah.
And I think this is making it really clear where like the specialization probably is not going to happen anymore on like the creative or the targeting or even campaign management. It's probably going to be more industry specific and like what data can they actually tap into. So I could imagine a world now where like you have like people who actually are great at autos, like actually great at retail, like actually great at pharma, because like they have the ability to connect that first party data to like custom models. And that feels useful, right? The other stuff, candidly feels less useful now, right? Because like you can see it, like if Midjourney is here right now, where's it going to be? A year from now.
Totally. And when ultimately, like, how much better would these things be at increasing ad relevance than humans? And my guess is like they'll probably surpass humans much faster.
Well, if the platforms are the ones grading it, and then as Google has announced and Facebook, they're also the ones starting to create, the content. I mean, you have a continuous feedback loop in a black box that it's really hard for people or kind of models that are not getting the same access to create that same high level content that's going to drive outcomes. May look great to the human eye, but for an ad auction, it may not perform well, and it may be opaque why it's not performing at the same level as something that Google created internally.
And I guess that kind of leads to a question that we've talked about quite a bit kind of on the market side, but like from your perspective, I think it's pretty clear, like with how well Facebook Advantage Plus and, Google PMax are working, that like those AI systems aren't going anywhere and they're going to be extremely performant. Now, like they are inherently biased to like their own incentives, just like, like Snap doesn't have the equivalent of this, but if we were at Snap and we were building it, the goal would be to make Snap money, right? We want you to make money too in the process. But like, do you have a point of view, just kind of as you've been diving more into like AI Whiteboard, like how important is like transparency into the models that you rely on going to be, or is it just going to be like, do you think just because these things are going to work so well, you'll be okay with it? Like, I don't know. Do you have like a point of view on?
Yeah, really good question. I think it's a good discussion point because one of the thing, and I thought today's one of the news the topics you guys were discussing around the openness of models and the trade desk news was very relevant because there is inherent like reason for these companies to not share any of that first party exposure data that's available in the open web ecosystem. But the only thing I see is regulation that might drive them towards opening this up. Other than that, right, like there, and even that will open up some layers. So if you guys think about like the closed loop systems that optimize all the ad buying, these control loops are not one single loop. So there's this like conversion loop that's the outermost loop, but then there's like other loops that are driving people to the landing page, then getting them to click through the funnel. So it's very hard for me to foresee a world where these companies open up versus get more closed, because especially if they continue to drive meaningfully higher value. Now, if the customer acquisition cost starts to rise and they lose their competitive advantage, then they might have to do things, then the power shifts back to the advertiser and they become one of the many different publishers out there. Having said that, it doesn't seem to be going in that direction. It seems to be actually going in the opposite direction, where with the Advantage Plus campaign, PMax, things over time just perform better. They figure out some of their signal resilience issues through CAPI and other APIs and other data appends. So currently doesn't seem to be going in that direction. But what do you guys what's your opinion on this?
I mean, I'm pretty long on the walled gardens. I think like barring a massive regulatory change, I think the setup for them to win is pretty good. Like I would want that hand, and I think it's like admirable what Trade Desk is trying to do, but like at some point, even these like independent streamers, the YouTube comes in and eats it, or time shifts toward TikTok. So I don't know. I think like open web.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an exciting, admirable thing, and I think it's like it provides value, obviously. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be really hard to optimize the people who have a view into a billion people constantly, right?
Yeah,
that seems like a challenge.
But it's interesting too to kind of see the evolution of what the open web actually means and how consumers interact with it because of the introduction of a lot of these models where. Microsoft Bing introduces ChatGPT as part of the search function. And so search just becomes very different. It is no longer a listicle of things that I specifically knew I wanted. And now it's more of a discussion or more of a discovery. And so I think that in itself is going to change how the Trade Desk or any kind of open web advertiser and platform has to engage.
I think I'm going to make a random ass prediction on where this is going to go. Where like if search, like how search could or should monetize. Might not happen, but let me suggest something that you would want to hear your thoughts on this. So today what happens is like you have this like list, rank ordered list, and you get this like sponsored ad. It's possible the sponsored ad doesn't go away, that stays. But in the organic recommendations that it gives, and especially if the organic recommendations are recommending businesses in any way, what these platforms might allow the end advertiser to do is surface the fact that something showed up in an organic search and you have the ability to ping or reach out to this customer with an offer. But after the fact that the organic result has already been surfaced, right? And the idea is that you basically give an incentive for that business to come actually interact with this end customer, right? And what this does is it at least keeps the search engine platform, which is now being run on a large language model, separate from what's surfaced. The surfacing of the offer only happens after the search has completed.
It's funny because what you're kind of what you're describing there is like, and to some extent, I guess this is kind of obvious, but these things all just become discovery platforms, right? So like Google starts to look and feel a lot more like you're on Instagram or on TikTok, right? And then the ability for someone that you maybe follow organically now has a paid mechanism to reach out to you. And that like doesn't, today, like we think of search as being this sort of like single player game, I guess. But like what you're describing is it kind of becomes a little multiplayer. And that would be kind of cool. Like, I think that sounds like a good experience because right now, to your point, there is no like feedback from the results. Whereas like we've been so accustomed to that in social.
Well, I was thinking about the other interesting aspect that I want to get your take on. So one of the things I did over this like last week, I was like, I had some time and actually wanted to go back into coding. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I like did some coding to do some calendar analysis. I wanted a tool to go into my Google Calendar, figure out who I've chatted with in the last like 2-3 years, and figure out who I should reach back out to, and then go into my email, get their email addresses, get their phone numbers. But this analysis like took me like 4 weeks to do, and in a language called R. This time around, I was like, hey, I'm going to switch over to Python and do the same analysis, really, but using the ChatGPT as a co-pilot. And I went from doing this analysis in 4 weeks down to 1.5 hours. Like hour and a half later of sitting with Copilot with a brand new language, I was able to get the same functionality that I couldn't get without that took me 4 weeks. Now, I'll asterisk this so that people don't get too excited. There were 2 or 3 places during this like exercise where ChatGPT just went into some circular loop and I had to like go and like intervene and get it to like go in the right direction. But this idea of like co-piloting with GitHub or co-piloting with ChatGPT really, really improved my programming experience and what I wanted, analysis I needed to get done, got done. I'm wondering, in the world of ad buying, marketing, do we go into the world of like co-pilot or more into the world that we were talking about earlier, where it's the Facebooks and Googles of the world that just take our money and do everything completely on their own? I'm wondering like where we'll end up. And I don't have an opinion on this. I feel like one or the other might be a winner, but I'm sure you guys have a take.
I think it's going to be primarily they take your money.
Yeah.
I think that, but I do think you could take all of the insights that come from them using their AI, and you could actually analyze that via AI and start to kind of understand your own business better from at least an abstracted way. And I think you could then use that as a way to learn about other parts of your business that may not be just ad buying.
Yeah.
Right. So that could be more like on the organic side. There could be product development. There could be kind of like if ads are like the last step in this very long process, there's like all those pieces before that I think the co-pilot could be really useful.
Yeah.
Right. And then it outputs into basically a black box, but then the results of that black box come back and I think train the rest of it. Like that feels like that could make sense. But like, I don't think you need the lever pulling and like the bulk upload and all that crap that all of us in like ad tech for a long time have been accustomed to, and like that there was value rightly or wrongly, ascribed to.
Yeah.
That stuff's gone.
Yeah. What about like across platforms, right? So I'm like sitting on a platform where I'm like, hey, I have this much budget. Here's a link to my credit card with this amount of budget. I'd like to split this between Google, Facebook, Snap, TikTok by this amount. What's my best strategy? Comes up with a couple of strategies. So, all right, let's go with strategy A, where like I'm going to start off. Like, do you think something along those lines, maybe?
Yeah, I think that feels like it's table stakes for like any type of system that you're going to kind of run your go-to-market strategies across. But kind of like the magic's in it being like, sure, you can figure out the budget allocation, but then like the real magic's going to come down at like the ad set campaign creative level inside like the Meta black box. But I do think there's learnings that can come from that again could be useful, but the value is going to have to be much more like upstream to like the ads, right? Like that to me feels like where there's an opportunity.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I think the era of, a 10, 15, 20 person buying team for a brand kind of is over. I think you whittle that down to, 2, 3 maybe. And it's kind of what you guys have already said, where you're there as a protection layer in case it gets in a loop or does something that's, not on brand guidelines or not in the strategy. You kind of do certain things that maybe the models can't do today and will eventually do. And then you try to redirect it into areas of the business that maybe aren't its primary task, but that you want to explore, right?
Yeah.
Other areas in branding, packaging, financial optimizations, whatever it may be, but just other areas of the business that maybe isn't the primary function. And so I think it will unlock kind of a lot of new insights across the business, because we're talking about marketing, but I think the same can be said for a finance team to look at statements of cash flow and how teams are spending, and then taking those learnings across the org and just other teams.
Yeah, like some of the demos I've seen on Excel being automated, like it's writing VBA code. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like if we had this, a few years ago, I think our job's a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think one thing that that's helped me, at least as I think about it, is, and maybe for people just like that haven't played around with these, is that effectively what it does mean is this is obviously an oversimplification, but like you basically have these little robots that'll work forever on your behalf to help reach your outcome. So like, it's not just like turn off this ad. Like it's so much more than that, right? It's just like, it's this constant loop that like has, relatively speaking, low cost to it. So like a campaign optimization, like media planning, all that stuff.
And all the constraints, you can give it all the constraints in advance so that it doesn't like jump over. I think that's going to be really fascinating to see how that goes. And the fact that like all these APIs can now be controlled with natural language, like that's pretty crazy.
So we've talked a little bit now about the marketing use cases, but what else are you getting excited about as you kind of look about where the space is going?
The biggest thing I'm seeing is a lot of apps that are being built that are these thin layers on top of like the base models or the APIs of Open API. That's what I'm seeing today. Now, the value in that is going to get sucked up by these larger companies that are going to command the pricing. So I feel like that doesn't, to me, seem like a long-term winning strategy. I think a lot of people make money in the short term, and very similar to the App Store, there'll be some winners out of that, but it'll be an insanely long tail. So if you disregard that, like what are the other trends that are jumping out at me? I'll share 3 things here, and you guys chime in on it and how you feel about it. Number one, we already talked about true personalization at scale. That is going to happen, and it's going to be really interesting because some of it might be emergent behavior. And where do we push the boundary of being creepy, right? Like if you guys remember the movie Minority Report, where he like walks up to an ad and it's like his photo with like the clothes, like talking with his language, like that will happen very likely. Somebody's going to do that now, and it's going to be a reality, and it'll be interesting to see where we land on that. Because up until now, all the personalization we were doing was at the end, some level of small segment level. It was all if then else type like segmentation. And now you can kind of say, hey, I have all the data about a customer. Let me write a crafted message for this customer based on their birthday and like all the combinations of things we know about them. And that becomes truly personalized. So that feels like it will happen. Again, that's, there's not a lot of moat there, but that's an emerging trend, and somebody will do it and somebody will do it well enough. The other thing that is very clear is there's going to be a divide between or a evolution of narrow model, deep models versus shallow models. So currently, all these models are pretty shallow. They're trained on 175 billion parameters or some insane billion number of parameters, but labeled by generalist humans who are looking at the data and say, oh, good enough answer. Like here's a question, here's an answer, good enough answer. But if you go into any kind of depth about any topic, these things will fail. Like they go into circular logic, or they just keep giving very generalized answers. So the question is, will we now get like a new job that will be expert data labelers who are then training specialized models? Now, there are a couple of early examples of this, and this is where I'm going to really interested in seeing the evolution of Harvey AI, which is a legal law specific AI model, and then the Bloomberg GPT, which is doing this for finance. So we'll see if there's any kind of evolution there. That means there will be a market for vertical specific AI models that people pay money for. And then the last one, I'm really excited about this. This is close to my heart because I'm a data person and I love the opportunities it will create there, is the ability of these models to take unstructured data and turn it into structured data, or take any structure to any structure without skipping a beat, where normally a human would have to write mapping or some sort of a keyword detection or regular expression. All that just goes away. Like you literally say, here's a blurb of like customer reviews. Give me the top 5 insights from these customer reviews that happen over and over again. And you're like, wow, this, like, nobody had to do any work and you can just get those. The fact that you can now do that. So those are kind of the 3 that I see. I'd love what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think on the deep model is something we've talked about a lot. That feels like that seems, at least at this moment in time, like inevitable, kind of to your point. And I think that is where there's like a lot of value, at least, kind of coming back to like the marketing side.
Yeah.
You could see there being players that actually can provide value in that context. And yeah, just like it's so early that I'm curious to see, like, I listened to, there was a 20 VC with the founder of Stable Diffusion, and he was talking about
another Emad Mushtaq, right?
Yes, but yeah, he was talking about there's going to be basically these, to some extent, like these private models. There's going to be national models. There's going to be models that are scoped to different, like, almost cultures. So you can see how, like, as this stuff as people are more exposed to like the broad use cases, they'll start to understand that there is a need for like specificity and narrowness. And I think until you have like AGI, that seems like that provides a lot of value. I don't know if like at the end of this, you don't need to, because
the master
robots take over. Yeah. But that to me feels like, for people like kind of us who aren't building like the foundational models, right, that feels like that's like an opportunity.
Totally. I see like a startup idea where like you have a marketplace where you can come in as an expert, train your own model, get paid fraction of the cost every time somebody uses it, and then you're that marketplace for specialized models.
100%.
And so there's your free kind of startup idea for anyone listening today. I guess for things that are already built though, and excluding AI Whiteboard, are there AI resources or AI tools that kind of you use and are really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, like every third day, like I see some insane, exciting tools. So for example, somebody just launched this like keyboard on your phone where anytime you respond to somebody in the text, you can literally just put it pings the ChatGPT API and it will send you back like what the response would be. So I would type, hey, respond to somebody with this type of message with this type of thing, and it will like create the message. I choose it and then I send it. So it's like KI keyboard. I mean, what a cool tool! Like very amazing to like just use right away. So lots of that happening. Another one is the Zapier plugin. Like I had it learn my email writing style, because anytime you have it write a note, you're kind of like, it uses these like very formal words like in conclusion, blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't want any of that. So I tell it to like connect to Zapier, connect to my email outbox, learn my writing style by reading the last few outbound emails, and then write an email in my style. And then gives me a lot more like similar sounding messages that look like what I would normally send.
Well, I think we'll have to check some of that out. I think that can save a few hours a week,
right?
James and I. But Emad, we're super excited that you were on the podcast today and want to be conscious of your time. But for anyone listening, where can folks follow you or get in touch, and where can they learn more about AI Whiteboard?
Yeah, so AI Whiteboard currently is on my personal website, which is ehasan, EHASAN.com. And you can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn, which are listed on that page. But really appreciate you guys having me. I'm so excited for this podcast. I know it looks like early days, but I've seen some amazing podcasts come up by just doing this, and I know one day I'm going to be like, I was one of the first few people on this podcast. So very excited for that.
Yeah, we feel really fortunate to have you on. So thank you. And we'll link to everything you just said to your site, your Twitter, and your LinkedIn in the show notes.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Having on.
Take care.